In today's age, almost everyone is buying crossover SUVs or trucks, and so sedan market is shrinking all the time. But you know, when you drive a car like this Mercedes-Benz CLA 250, you're reminded of all the great things that a sporty sedan still offers. So sometimes I want to remind my friends and people who are looking for cars to please don't overlook sedans. They are still one of the better buys when it comes to providing a good balance of performance, ride and drive, and just the overall feeling of kind of fun to drive factor. By the way, I keep calling this a sedan, but Mercedes likes to call this CLA 250 a four-door coupe or coupe, depending which country you live in, because of the stylish design, sloping hood line, and a coupe-like profile. So I do call it a sedan because that's the general category, but because of the design and because of the really sleek profile, you could call this a four-door coupe. Most crossovers and SUVs these days just do not drive very well. But compare that to something like this, the CLA, and it's fun to drive, it's very well balanced, it's comfortable and quiet. Honestly, this has almost everything the larger C-Class have at a much lower price point, and of course at a smaller package. For some of us who live in the city or who want a smaller car, this works out better. And it's still quite practical. I don't know why so many of us wants to buy SUV, because most of us do not use that much space in the back. Sedans still offer plenty of practicality and space in terms of trunk space or interior, and provides a little bit more security because you can't see everything through the back window like you can in the SUV or crossover. So I really enjoy this CLA 250. This is a really quick, brief review. And I think it has one of the best balance of ride and performance, and everything from the way the engine works to the way the transmission shift to the way the brake and acceleration works is really world class. Hard to believe you can get that level of performance and features for affordable pricing. Of course, it's not a cheap car, it's still a Mercedes, but the pricing is very reasonable. And I think if you're again shopping for a new car that offers best of performance and the best of ride and practicality at a reasonable price with a Mercedes-Benz badge on it, this is one car that you shouldn't overlook. So let's go for a quick ride and I'll talk a little bit more about the car. So this 2021 Mercedes-Benz CLA 250, it's actually quite a pleasant and a wonderful car to drive. This is just a brief, quick overview. I'm going over a few of the Mercedes cars that I think is underrated. This is definitely one of those cars. I know people tend to talk about the C-Class, and they talk about, of course, everyone talks about the new S-Class, and more buyers are buying SUV these days, and so they're looking into GLC and some of the other SUVs. But so I know that CLA tends to get a little bit overlooked, but it's one of the better buys. I think the price is right. The features are really well optioned in this car, and for the money you get a great amount of value. I think the ride, the driving feel, the overall quality, the overall performance, it's actually really good for the money. And but because it's not the C-Class, it's not it's not the GLC, it tends to get overlooked by buyers. And this is one car that people might forget exists even in the Mercedes lineup. But I think as I show you by taking you over this quick drive, you'll see what I mean. But the drive is fantastic. It's too many manufacturers have in this type of price range. They load up the car with features and options, but the ride and the drive feel isn't very mature and it's not very well done. But in this case, they really brought a higher class feel to the drive, both in terms of the engine, the transmission, the braking, and particularly the steering. I'm actually very impressed with the steering feel on this model. Good overall feel. I can feel that there is a road underneath, because some cars, the power assisted steering is so overboosted you don't feel anything. But on this CLA 250, there's just the right amount of feedback from the road, so I can feel that on my steering. And then as I turn my steering, there is just the right amount of resistance, and that feel of the steering fighting back with you a little bit. I don't mean fighting back, but kind of pushing back to the center. We call that on-center feel, and that on-center feel is really good actually for a small car like this, first class. And at the same time, the interior also feels pretty rich and expensive and loaded with high-tech and expensive-looking features all throughout the interior. But in terms of driving, I think that's the part I like the most about this car. It has really good pep. You step on the gas. It's not a super fast car, but it surprises you. It feels faster than it is. And acceleration is quite quick and responsive, and the steering feel, as I mentioned, is really good. It is a bit light at the lower speed, but as I speed up, as I pick up the speed and begin to move around, the steering actually has a very good feel. The cornering, or the ability for the car to carve through the road, is also very good. A good set of tires and wheels on this car. And I think it's a really pleasant car. So for those people who still like sedan, and there's still many of you, please consider this. This is one of the underrated and underappreciated car for sure. I think it's also very refined. It's quiet on the road. Honestly, it has the feel of C-Class, 80% of what C-Class feels. Obviously inside a smaller package, but with more high-tech features until the new C-Class comes out, that is. But in comparison to the 2021 C-Class, this one has more high-tech features. It has a tremendously good overall refinement feels. It's smooth on the road. Surprisingly, just an overall great package for the price. So I think the CLA 250 is one car that you should look at it if you're not needing an actual SUV. And some of us still like the feeling of a sedan because you sit a little bit lower. It's a little bit more compact. It's definitely a better handling car because you're not sitting tall. And generally speaking, it's a better looking car, of course. I think so anyways. So if you don't need the extra space of a SUV or crossover, this is actually a really good buy. This Mercedes CLA 250 competes with Audi A3 and BMW 2 Series, particularly the 2 Series Grand Coupe. And I've driven, of course, all those cars in direct comparison to this one. And I think the CLA 250 actually has the best balance of performance and the ride. The Audi is also really well done. Of course, there's a new model now coming up very soon. But the Mercedes 2 Series Grand Coupe is a great looking car that has a bit of a lackluster feel in terms of driving. So I think the BMW is not quite as good as CLA, and Audi could be very competitive. It doesn't look anywhere as luxurious or as well put together as this Mercedes CLA. I think particularly impressive is the interior of the CLA. It is gorgeous. It does not look like kind of entry-level car, if you can call this an entry-level car, but it's got a gorgeous interior that I think is one of the best in the market. It has a combination of glossy black mixed in with a good texture of different materials, with even this kind of a matte black finish. And in this case, this one has a sort of an optional package, so it's got red stitching. And you know what? At a first glance, you think this car costs twice as much because of the way the design looks, the way that everything comes together, and just the overall quality of fit and finish is really, really well done. I didn't hear any squeaks or rattles, and the body fit and finish and the overall quality is really, really first class. And I really like the seat actually on this optional package. Really hugs you really well, almost like in a kind of sports coupe. So again, it has all the tech features you can imagine. It's got a big infotainment system. It's all digital instrumentation now, all come together, and it has some cool features such as if you say, hey, Mercedes, is going to respond and actually help you through some of the items that you want to do in the car, much like an iPad or Alexa responding to your request. So the interior has a really great design. It's also surprisingly practical. The back seat is actually pretty good. It's not super roomy, but it's more than enough for medium distance, maybe not for long distance. And as I mentioned, this seat with a side bolster and sort of Alcantara insert really holds you down, and the seat is as good as what you'll find in the kind of sports coupes. And so kind of in conclusion, I think the reason why I really like this CLA 250 is that first of all, it's reasonably practical because it's still a four-door sedan. It's got a decent trunk space and a decent back space. So it's practical enough to be used on an everyday basis and as even your only car that you might have. Yet it has performance of a kind of a coupe. It has a good hugging seat, side with a big side bolsters, a really good steering feel, reasonably high performing engine that give you plenty of pep, and just the feel of the drive when you take this car on the curvy road. Honestly, it kind of feels like a sports coupe, maybe even better than some of the other sports coupes I've driven. So you get the feel of a performance coupe, you get the practicality of a four-door sedan, and yes, and it's much more fun to drive than your typical crossover or larger SUV, because all those cars in the larger category, they just don't drive as well. This is a nimble, fun car to drive, something that you look forward to driving every day when you wake up and get into a car and go for a ride. And yet it has decent back space because you can't get that in a sort of a sportier, true coupe style car. So overall, I think this is a really, really quick review of this CLA 250. I'm impressed by the package, the performance, the price point, and most of all, the design and the interior finishing is fantastic. And it's a one car that gets overlooked in the Mercedes lineup, but shouldn't be, because it's an excellent buy from my perspective. Just to finish off this review, the CLA does come in the AMG inspired and AMG powered CLA 35 and CLA 45 with much larger horsepower and torque increase. So here's the bonus content. I also had a chance to drive the Mercedes E-Class in the E450 format, and I came away so impressed with that power plant because of the way that the power and torque is delivered. And again, one more time, a reminder that sedans actually perform better than crossovers and SUVs. E-Class, of course, has a long history of being one of the best-selling cars in the world in the Mercedes lineup. And the handling is very impressive with very predictable, balanced feel that I think is superior to the Audi A6 or the BMW 5 Series. In particular, the BMW 5 Series is very soft and kind of mushy, and it's a little bit numb, whereas the E450 I drove had a really quite a precise feel and reasonably accurate steering. I think it's one of the sleeper cars again. It's one model that many people overlook, even though the E-Class has been a great seller, just because people are moving to SUV and crossovers. I was very impressed, and it's again one of the better cars that everyone should consider if you are buying a mid-size sedan.